This is chapter 19 on environmental law and policy. We're going to just start with current and historical environmental laws. It's going to read somewhat just like a list of different laws. The textbook does go into more detail and kind of give some examples and case studies and history of these more than this slideshow will. So I suggest you go take a look at the book. So it starts with water law. This is a surface water law. So there's pretty much two types. There's the riparian doctrine and the prior appropriation doctrine. So the riparian doctrine says if you own land next to the water body, so if it's a creek or a lake or I suppose ocean, like you have rights to that, but it's supposed to be for beneficial use, and you're supposed to put the water back in the same condition it was found. So you're not supposed to, pollute it for everybody else. And the prior appropriation one is whoever started using it first has rights. This is more common in the West. This is more common in the East, if you look. And then we have both doctrines, so kind of like a merge here on the very West Coast. And this is all prior appropriation. Navigable streams, which is anything you can navigate. So if you can put a boat on it, it's navigable, are treated as community as public property. Groundwater law is more complex than surface water law because you can't really, it takes a lot of work to figure out the limits of the aquifer. There's a lot of drilling, and you can't just figure that out on your own land. You have to do a lot of hydrological work, which is a lot of kind of mathematics. Um, so very complex one, and the fact that we started using groundwater, I think, before we really realized a lot of the science behind it. So anyways, but the laws, we have the rule of capture, which I guess comes from English, which pretty much means if it's under your land, you can use it. However, you can drain everybody else's land too, so that's not really right. Um, the American or rule of reasonable use says you can use it for beneficial use in connection with the land above. Um, and so that's kind of protecting your neighbors. And then you have correlative rights in California and I don't know what that is. Is that New Jersey? This state. Is it New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York? I think that is New Jersey. Um, which is kind of proportional. Like if your land ownership on top of the aquifer is large, then you can use a large amount. Or if it's small, you can use a small amount. So somehow they like correlate it to your surface ownership. Minerals and fuel. So laws meant to encourage exploitation of natural resources. I expect this comes after the country purchased to the West. They definitely wanted people to come out and, settle the West and, the westward ho expansion and all that. I suspect this is part of that, but I'm not a historian, so I don't really know. But it seems to have started in like 1872. Um, I went back a slide. There we go, 1872, which granted mineral rights and land title to anyone pretty much wanting to mine something they found. If so definitely encouraging it. Even says what and the federal government invested some time and money. Oh no, that's to whoever invested some time and money into developing it. Then that kind of improved in 1920. I guess, kind of land ownership had kind of taken over. Um, so then it pretty much turned into leasing. So where you just like pay rental fee essentially for that land. Mine Reclamation, Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977 applied only to coal, and it intended to minimize the long-term impact of coal mining on the land surface. And it stipulated that groundwater recharge capacity has to be restored. Several states have enacted their own laws regulating mining within their boundaries. No state has received financial returns from mineral extraction on federal lands. So the book does talk about how it was so cheap to mine the federal land. Like you'd rather do it on the federal land than elsewhere, and then the state wouldn't get any money from that. The federal government wouldn't get any money from that either, before or prior to the whole leasing thing. States must contend with a variety of pollution problems that mining produces. So they weren't getting the money, but they were dealing and paying for the cleanup. Mineral claims at sea, oh, international now, have often become issues of serious dispute. You find, I don't know, a gold mine, oil and gas or something offshore. Who owns that? The traditional 3 mile territorial limit seems to have been expanded to 200 miles now. Um, some countries tried to extend it to the whole continental shelf. But so when some continental shelves are really, really wide, like ours on the East Coast, so then they said 200-mile limit, um, with exceptions, and it gets all technical. I don't remember all the technicalities. But not all nations benefit because if you don't have a big continental shelf, like California doesn't, so if you're like, a Pacific island, you're not going to have a continental shelf, and so you're not going to benefit from this. Okay, we can go 200 miles out on your continental shelf. Um, so there are disputes. Then, Third United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea in 1982 established exclusive economic zones, EEZs, which were zones extending 200 miles offshore from a nation's coast. Um, so they went down, plotted everything out, and then I don't think it's strictly on the continental shore anymore or platform. Within which the 1982 law of the Cedar Treaty recognizes that nation's exclusive right to resource exploitation. A provision could allow a country to claim more continental shelf or ocean floor and extend their EEZ. These are the technicalities I was talking about. So here are some maps, some different minerals being explored in the ocean. Cobalt-rich ferromanganese nodule, or no, polymetallic nodules. They just call this crust. And then here's a map of the U.S. Undersea territory. Um, Antarctica. So at one point in time, all these different countries were like, we own slices of Antarctica, which I feel like we kind of try to do with the moon, probably Mars soon. Um, so in 1961, the countries got together and actually decided to get rid of all territorial claims. Then the Convention for the Regulation of Antarctic Mineral Resources Activities in 1988 established restrictive controls on Antarctica mineral exploration and extracted. That regulation was not fully accepted by the U.S., but the U.S. did pass an Antarctic Protection Act of 1990, and encourages others to sign on. And the EPA has really strict rules on non-government activities like scientific study and tourism, which I think is funny because, like, real strict rules on scientific studies, but like, what about mining and stuff? I don't know. I'd have to look more into it. Water pollution. The Refuse Act of 1899 prohibited dumping or, so now we're on water. Prohibited dumping or discharge of refuse in navigable water. And since pretty much all water flows into navigable water, it pretty much just prevented it altogether or prohibited it altogether. The Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1956 focused on municipal waste treatment. Water Quality Improvement Act of 1970 and the Clean Water Act of 1977 addressed spills and chemical pollutants. I think water pollution control measurements have really, really come along more than like the mining ones. Subsequent legislative actions modified many provisions of these laws, but few major improvements or overhauls have occurred. Air pollution. This was interest. Oh no, I'm gonna get ahead of myself. I'm gonna stop. Air pollution. Clean Air Act of 1963 empowered federal agencies to undertake air pollution control efforts. It was amended in 1965 to allow national regulation of motor vehicle emissions. The Air Quality Act of 1965 required air quality standards on known harmful effects of several air pollutants, and the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 is more restrictive than the previous act. So again, a lot of improvements in air pollution. On to waste disposal. The Solid Waste Disposal Act of 1965 and the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act of 1976 was intended to help state and local governments deal with disposal of municipal solid waste. The EPA monitors the compliance with these acts. This Recovery Act was amended in 1984, which imposed new requirements on landfills and disposal sites and banned disposing toxic liquid waste into a landfill. Um, then the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act reauthorization of 1999 failed. Additional regulation for broader pollution controls and mining waste are needed. Funding for identified toxic waste sites is needed to continue work that the Superfund program began. So we do need to figure out what to do with toxic waste. And that is it for our list of environmental laws.